Hello and welcome to Carmichael Clan Radio, the official podcast of Clan Carmichael USA. Welcome back to another episode of Carmichael Clan Radio. On today's show, I'm excited to be joined by the director and co-founder of the ReiversRoad.com, Alastair Cunningham, to talk about Scotland's relatively unknown history of border reiving that began in the late 13th century and lasted until the early years of the 17th century. We also talk about how landowners during those times had to ride the marches to ensure that their lands had not been encroached upon, and how those riding traditions eventually led to the modern-day common riding traditions that can be seen during the summer months throughout the Scottish border region. According to their website, the Reivers Road was created to tempt tourists in Scotland away from the most popular destinations and into the border region of Scotland. To do this, Alastair drew on his 20 years of experience operating Scottish tours and helped to create an app which can be downloaded to provide users a GPS-activated virtual tour guide along pre-planned routes through the border region of Scotland. To learn more about the Reivers Road, visit www.thereiversroad.com. Before we get started, a reminder that the 2023 Carmichael Clan Gathering is coming up in June. If you have not yet reserved your spot, don't miss out on this fantastic opportunity to take part in a historical event in Clan Carmichael history. If you're interested in attending, you can follow the link from Clan Carmichael USA website or visit the Clan Carmichael International website at www.carmichael.co.uk. That's www.carmichael.co.uk. Also, make sure to stop by again at the Clan Carmichael USA website to learn more about how to become a member or how you can get involved in Clan Carmichael USA. If you're still not a member, we hope you'll consider joining and becoming part of one of the best clans today. Visit www.clancarmichaelusa.com to learn more. While you're there, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution to the Clan Carmichael Scholarship Fund or the Clan Carmichael Restoration Fund. Donations can be made by clicking the Donate button right at the top of the Clan Carmichael USA homepage. Your donations help support Clan Carmichael USA as we expand and grow to do even more in the future. And now, let's get started with the show. All right, so Alastair Cunningham from the Reivers Road, thanks so much for joining me today on Carmichael Clan Radio. I wanted to start with a question. I'd really never heard much about the common riding traditions in Scotland until about a month ago when it was casually mentioned in an email exchange between some of the Carmichael administrators and leadership. This topic of common ridings came up, but I'd never heard of it. And so I got to reading a little bit, found an article by Sandy Neal, and in it he had talked about how there was, these common ridings were little seen or understood by the outside world. And I thought, well, that really must be true because I had never heard of them up until that point. So I wanted to see if maybe you could talk to us a little bit. But I thought that maybe before we get into the common riding traditions that we might want to first talk about the history of these and what border reivers were.
Sure. I mean, you say that the common ridings are little known outside Scotland. They're little known within Scotland either, in the big cities or in the Highlands where there was no tradition of common ridings. They're pretty well known in the borders, which is kind of the heart of the common riding tradition now. Lanark is a slight outlier, but they've been celebrating the common riding since certainly since 1570 and probably earlier. But to return to the reivers, a reiver is probably not a familiar word to many people, but it comes from the same root as bereft. It really means to rob, to steal. And the reigning times were really in the 16th century, when Scotland was plagued with a succession of child monarchs. We first of all had James V, and then we had Mary Queen of Scots, and then we had James VI, and whenever they became adult, something went badly wrong. Either they were defeated in battle, or there was a revolt, or whatever. And the area which were now known as the Borders, which is along the English border, was really quite loyalist. The barons were in control. They were fighting for influence and for territory, and nobody was really bothered about the people going and stealing other folks' cattle. And this led to the reaving. And we in Scotland like to think that the reaving was largely people riding over the border by moonlight and driving off English cattle. But the truth of the matter is that that the reavers, particularly the reavers from Teviotdale in Hawick, they were going in every direction to drive off cattle. And of course, similarly, the English were coming up here. Some raids were just small with half a dozen folk. Some raids were almost like an invading army with 300 people. And it was a question of survival, because there was no law, as I say. They could grow crops, but the chances were that the English would come and burn them. And so they relied on cattle. And if you run out of your own cattle, then there was an obligation on the headsman of the family to go and get some cattle from somewhere else.
Okay, so that was the primary target then, were livestock, so cattle. That was mostly what the raids were focused on?
Absolutely, but they also used to drive back horses and goats, and occasionally people who were then used effectively as slaves or as servants.
You said that the raiders were not only from the Scottish side, but also from the English side, correct?
Very much so, yes. Because it was a similar situation in England. I mean, England is about 400 miles long, and people up on the border were a long way from the long hand of the law. And there was a sort of common culture between the Scottish borders and the English borders. They were one kingdom until Hadrian built his wall across the middle of it all.
Okay. How did the groups identify themselves? Were these clan groups at the time, or were they based on where you lived, or was it more family attached?
Well, that's a big question. The word clan is Gaelic, and it just means children. And really, clans belong in the Highlands, not in the borders, although large families were called clans by people in Edinburgh who were complaining about the general reaving and lawlessness in that area. And the answer to your question is that there would be family groups, but there wouldn't be just one family or extended family. There would certainly be other people with other names who were associated with that particular family. And unlike in the Highlands, where a clan chief would call out his clan and everybody was required to turn up and fight, that was not the same in the borders. If somebody was going off on a road, then other people would be expected to come. But if they didn't come, then that didn't really matter too much. It was perhaps a slight dishonor, but it wasn't the same as the clan-based society up north, where the clan chief had a complete power.
And I guess these situations in the borders And I think you kind of touched on this. This was more about just sheer survival. You know, you had to steal from your neighbor that had maybe previously stole from you, but that was the name of the game here, was just survival, correct?
This is exactly it. It was raid and counter raid, and there's a nice story of Marion Scott of Dryhope Castle in Yarrow, who famously, when the larder was empty, she put a pair of spurs on her husband's plate, and that was the indication to go off and get something.
Message received.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. I was trying to read into this a little bit, and I saw something that I think it was called March Law.
Yeah.
And tell me if I'm right about this. I thought I saw something that mentioned that if you had been robbed or raided, that you could retaliate. Is that something you're familiar with?
You could. There was something called the hot trod. You could follow your own beasts and the raiders to the source of the trouble, and take the beasts back if you could.
Okay.
And March law, which you mentioned, was administered by the wardens of the marches, who were significant people appointed by the monarchs on each side. And every now and again, there would be a meeting of the wardens of the marches, and complaints would be raised. And so some Scotsman would say, well, you know, that chap over there, he did a raid on my property and drove off 50 beasts. And then the other would say, well, that's absolute rubbish because he raided me first. And the wardens of the marches, one English and one Scot, had to sort this out and agree recompense if that was appropriate. This didn't really work terribly well, because although the English wardens of the marches were significant sort of general type people who had authority, the Scottish wardens of the marches tended to be the headsmen of the families that were actually doing the reading. And so very often there wasn't really a very intelligent discussion, you might say. And there were often scuffles on these peace days when problems were meant to be being sorted out.
Okay. Well, the reading made it sound like a much more civil affair, but it sounds like it definitely wasn't. And, you know, so that makes me think of this word that you've mentioned several times, and I mentioned it also, just the word marches. Marches is referring to the border area, correct?
Not exactly. The march is the same word as a frontier or a boundary.
Okay.
And so in the south of Scotland here, we talk about a march dyke, meaning a stone wall which divides two properties. And the march, probably with capital T, capital M, was the dividing line between Scotland and England.
Oh, okay. And so I guess the phrase riding the marches is just talking about riding the boundaries or riding that border. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Now, the march is the march between Scotland and England, but there were marches around every borough, where the borough lands ended and private property began.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, talk about this practice of riding the marches then, because, you know, there were these border raids that were taking place, people stealing from each other, and so that led to this practice of riding the marches.
Yeah. So a little bit of history. Elizabeth I of England, the Virgin Queen, died without issue, of course, and the next in line to the throne, perhaps rather strangely, was James VI of Scotland, who was the son of Mary Queen of Scots. And so in 1603, James VI of Scotland rode down to England and became James I of England. And having one king over both Scotland and England meant that he and his people could come down very hard on Reivers on both sides, and so that really put an end to the reaving in 1603. But there were still these young folk who were of a kind of warlike disposition and liked riding out. And I'm being a little bit cynical here, but that you could find an occupation for these guys by saying, look, you just head out and ride all the way around the Borough lands and make sure that there are no incursions.
Okay.
And that was the origin of it. It nowadays, well, I mean, since probably the 17th century, it's been not the 17th century, the 18th century really. It became each town started to ride the marches on a specific day. In Lanark, it's I think the first or the Thursday between the 6th and the 10th or something. But originally, it just the riding of the marches took place when required, and only later did a calendar emerge.
And so when they were riding the marches, when this was started, the literature that I came across said that they were checking neighboring landowners to make sure they had not encroached on the boundary. Were they looking to see if cattle had been stolen at that time, or were they just checking their land to make sure people hadn't built structures on it?
Now, it's more to see if neighboring landowners had were running their cattle on the borough lands, or later on, as people started to enclose fields, were the landowners enclosing fields that didn't belong to them.
Okay. And so this led to the practice then of what we call today common ridings.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit about how those grew out of riding the marches and what the common ridings are today. I'm sure they don't look anything like they used to. It looks like, from what I've seen, that they're more of a celebration. Tell me about what the common ridings are today.
Well, you're right. Nowadays, they're very much a celebration and a good excuse for a party and some dancing and some dressing up and all the rest of it. In the early days, it was a little bit more sinister. People were a little bit more worried about things going wrong, and there was also a sort of a feeling that grew up that if you didn't ride the marches, then that the town was in danger. And doing the riding of the marches, and in Lanark, which your clan's associated with, they started bringing birch twigs or beams of birch back from the common ridings, and there were other traditions in other towns. And so at first it was just probably one day, and then it gradually grew. And particularly in the 19th century, celebrating Queen Victoria's Jubilee and the Empire and all the rest of it, people were all feeling pretty good. I think it was 1893 that Lanark started crowning a Lanima Queen. And in Peebles, we started the Belton celebrations. And in Hawick, the common riding started to extend from 1 or 2 days to where it is now. Hawick is perhaps the most famous of the common ridings. And there are 14 ride-outs before the big day, before Common Riding Friday. And these ride-outs now have got nothing to do with checking the common lands, of course. It's just an excuse for a load of folk to canter across the countryside and meet for a picnic, maybe some horse racing, and then come back. And so it's it's an excuse for a good day out, and it's kind of an endorsement of the equestrian nature of the borderlands and the south of Scotland.
That is interesting about the equestrian nature of the borderlands because, reading through a little bit of the literature too, I saw some things about that. I previously didn't realize that equestrianism and horses were such a big part of the culture of those border towns and the border areas. So let's say a tourist were to come over to Scotland and attend one of the common riding festivals. I know they're all different and they're all very unique. How would an American tourist get involved? Do you just show up is there a particular day that you show up? Are there things going on in the town, or is it just the horses that are going out? Is that where the celebration is taking place? What would this look like to someone coming over?
This is a great question. And I have to say that the common riding in each of these border towns is very much a town celebration. It is not an event for tourists. Now, I've been involved in tourism for the past 20 years, and this is a source of frustration to me because if you stand in the side where the ride-outs are going out, it's a most wonderful experience. You get the noise, you get the smell, you get the excitement, and of course you get 200 or 300 people all dressed up and all heading off in the same direction, floating a river, normally following a flag, bringing back this, that, and the other. And in the morning, there are strange things like in Lanark they throw buns down from from the townhouse or something. In Hoyt, for some reason, they throw snuff. No, they don't throw it. There's a general scuffle to see if you can get bits of snuff, which goes back to obviously a couple of 100 years. If you're an American and you're keen to watch the common ridings, you really have to do your homework. As you rightly say, you have to know when the common riding is in the town that you want to visit. And the problem to some extent is that on the day of the common riding, the march riding, whatever it is, all the shops are going to be closed. And so you have to book your hotel in a neighboring town and be prepared to sort of eat there. And then you go and you have to brief yourself as to the right places to stand in order to see the celebrations, which are terrific. I mean, very different in each town, but always spectacular and full of local pride and a celebration of local culture.
Is that there was something? I think it was the Peebles celebration where the people were divided into. I wrote this. It's Sturifits and gutter bluids. Is that and that's basically people who are known and people who are not known or are from out of town. Is that?
That's right. People are born and bred peoples and people who aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it does sound like there's a lot of, and I guess this can trace its origins back to the border reavings and the riding the marches, but a lot of tribalism. Maybe that's not the correct word, but just like you mentioned, it's a celebration for that town more so than anything else.
Yeah, there isn't really a resentment of other people who aren't born and bred, but those who are born and bred, although those who move in and get involved in the local culture, I guess they enjoy themselves. They're not interested in putting on a show for anybody else, but the show is definitely worth seeing.
Are there any kind of rivalries between the border towns having these celebrations, or is
enormous rivalries?
Oh, are there?
Absolutely, enormous rivalries. Between Gala and Hoyt, which are the two big border towns, for example, they don't hate each other, but they constantly make jokes about each other, and enormous rivalries. And it goes all the way across from Berwick in the east to Langham in the west. And they're all intensely proud of their own town. But the other thing is that at any border march or common riding, they invite the principals from one of the other border towns to ride out with them. And so in Lanark, for example, you'd probably get, 2 people from Peebles, 2 people from Selkirk, 2 people from West Linton, wherever it is, and they're in their own gear, maybe with their own flag. No, they don't have their own flag, but they are identifiable as being from the neighbouring town. And so, the hand of friendship is extended, even although there is intense rivalry.
Do the flags play a tradition, or do they play an important part of the celebrations also?
Well, I'm not aware of a flag playing any role in Peebles, but in Hoyk, which is the biggest common riding, the flag is absolutely central. And this is a flag which was stolen from a group of raiders in 1514. And these raiders came from Hexham, and they had the banner of the Abbey of Hexham. And this was stolen by the young men of Hoyk. And this banner has been obviously refreshed a few times over the centuries since 1514. But it is, to say it's sacred may not be accurate, but it's quite close to being sacred. And it is carried round the bounds by the cornet, and then handed back to the town council for safekeeping until the next common riding Friday.
And you mentioned that the principals that they're involved. Tell me who the principals are. I know they change every year, but would it be one of the principals that would carry the flag in that particular celebration?
Yes. Well, the way that the number of different names. In Hoyk, it's the cornet. In Duns, it's the Reivers. In Melrose, it's the Melrosian. And whoever it is, it's a young man who is chosen in various different ways to represent the town. But he has to be competent in a number of ways. And first of all, he's got to be a competent horseman. Mm-hmm. Secondly, he's got to be able to dance, because there's always a cornet's reel or something in the high street. Thirdly, he's got to be able to make some sense, because you'll have to make a speech, and he's got to be. I don't know about all the other towns, but in many, he has to be unmarried, and in every town he chooses a lass. And the lass is, doesn't accompany him on horseback, but supports him outside the time when he's on horseback.
Okay. Is there you're brave to take on an interview like this for celebrations that are all so different, but is there a typical age that principal might be? Is it a younger person, or does it not matter?
Yeah, he's always in the late 20s, early 30s, something like that.
Okay, just someone that meets the qualifications that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Well, with the Clan Carmichael, you mentioned that our clan lands are in South Lanarkshire, and that there's the Lanark Day. Is Lanark considered one of the border areas? I know it's not exactly close to the border, but is it considered one of the areas? And is the Lanark Day, is that a common riding celebration, or is that something different?
No, that is a common riding celebration, but Lanark is a bit of an outlier, really. When it comes to it, you couldn't really call Lanark as being a border town. They wouldn't they wouldn't want to be called a border town. The Lanarkshire is a significant area, as you know, just south of Glasgow.
Mm-hmm.
And so, their tradition is just as good as anyone else's tradition. It's been going on since 1570. And it's clearly very much alive, but I've never seen it. And I mean, this is the sort of classic common riding, even although the folk from Lanark weren't really involved in the predecessor activity of reaving.
Yeah, that's what I wondered, because I was trying to learn a little bit about Latimer Day, and it looked different than a lot of the other common riding celebrations. You said they didn't have that history of riding the marches, right?
Oh, sorry. They did have the history of riding the marches. They didn't have the history of reaving.
Oh, okay.
And if you think it looks different, I mean, there's the Latimer Queen. Is a significant part of the celebrations, and floats or lorries going through the town in a procession. Mm-hmm. That's very similar to what goes on in Peebles. And each town has very much its own, its own traditions. In Selkirk, it's really all about the Battle of Flodden, 1513, and who came back from the Battle of Flodden. And in Galashiels, it's all about some raid which has just about been forgotten by everybody else, where the English grabbed their plums as they came past, and so each town has a different tradition. One thing that did surprise me, I had a look at sort of Latimer Day, that I'm not sure of any other town where there was a pedestrian checking of the marches. And apparently there's sort of large crowds of people do a sort of a 3-mile walk.
Huh.
And that sounds great. I'm not aware of that being a part of any other town's common riding.
Okay. Do they have, or with the Latimer's Day, do they have the rideouts, like traditional rideouts on horseback as well?
They do, well, yeah. But they have, it looks like a fairly short rideout, but yes, they have a rideout.
That's interesting. So this is obviously celebrated on the Scottish side of the border now. Are there any kinds of equivalent celebrations on south of the Scottish border today?
This is a very interesting question, and the answer is no.
Okay.
And it's quite difficult to establish why. And I suppose in Scotland, Reivers felt rather put upon by the English, and therefore we're celebrating sort of our identity and being still sort of up and about. Whereas in England, it has not endured. The other thing actually in Scotland is thanks to Sir Walter Scott, who collected all the ballads that masses of ballads that were being sung and spoken around the borders, and a lot of them involved reaving. That kind of injected more life into the whole idea of reaving and common riding. There's a chap called Willis Stewart, who was a member of Parliament, and he was the MP for Carlisle and the border, and he was sort of kind of trying to see if there was any appetite for some sort of a common riding over the other side of the border, but I don't think he got an enormous amount of support.
It is really interesting that that both sides of the border were doing these raids and checking their lands, but yet only on the Scottish side do they continue this these celebrations today. That's a really interesting point, and it does make sense. It sounds like what you've said, that it's just kind of part of the Scottish celebrating their heritage, and maybe that's why they've chosen to continue it today.
Nice.
Well, tell me a little bit about your website and your business, also the Reivers Road.
Well, it follows on quite nicely from your earlier remarks, because you were talking about the borders being a well-kept secret.
Mm-hmm.
And for the best part of 20 years, I ran a tour operator called Scottish Clans and Castles, and we were arranging for people largely from North America to come over and explore their clan lands and visit their castles. And they all wanted to go to the Isle of Skye, Loch Ness, St Andrews and Stirling. And the Reivers Road was an attempt to put a bit of a spotlight on the borders. And what we do is that we have full tales, and there's a commentary as you go around at stories and a bit of music and some poetry, and it is GPS triggered. So as you drive along, the commentary starts, and you are told what you're seeing on the left or the right, what you're about to see, and any poems or songs that relate to that particular valley, that particular area.
That's really cool. So you can. What do you listen to it on? Is it on a phone?
You listen to it on your phone, yeah.
Okay.
But amplified through your car radio.
That's really neat. I've never heard of anything like that before. That's really neat. So you drive the routes, and it's kind of a virtual tour guide. Is that right?
It is. Yeah, a virtual tour guide is a good description.
Okay, that's really interesting. Well, tell the listeners how they can learn more about the Reivers Road. Tell me what your website is, and I'll mention it in the show notes as well. But how can listeners find out more about you and about what you're doing at the Reivers Road?
Well, go to the website, www.thereiversroad.com, and you can have a look at the trails. You can listen to a short summary of each of the trails. And I mean, if you want to, it costs £12.50 for one of these trails. And frankly, if you take it at a leisurely sort of holiday pace, each one of these trails will take you half a day or so. If you're going to stop and look at things as well as driving along. And you can, if you want to download the commentary without actually coming to Scotland, you can do that too.
Okay.
I'm afraid that none of the trails at the moment cover Lanarkshire or any of the Carmichael Towers, but they cover all the way along the border from Berwick in the east to Langham in the west. And so, yeah, we're very much on the border weaving and march riding circuit there.
Okay. You know, what I've found also is that even the Carmichaels that listen to the show are interested in learning about all parts of Scottish history. So I think that, you know, even if it doesn't quite get up to Lanark and the Carmichael estate, that they would be interested in checking it out too. And so I'll make sure to put up links.
Good. You'll be very welcome.
And did you say you could actually, you mentioned they're GPS triggered, but you could actually take those tours from your home as well too, correct?
Yes, you can. You can listen to it. Yeah.
Okay. I will check that out myself too. Well, Alastair Cunningham, I really appreciate you joining us today on our show on Carmichael Clan Radio. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and a truly fascinating conversation about something that I was previously completely unaware of. So I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk to me, and we wish you all the best of luck with the Reivers Road too, okay?
Good. Someone enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks again so much to Alastair Cunningham for taking the time to join us on today's show. I had a great time talking to him about common writings and learned a ton about the often overlooked part of Scottish history. Again, to learn more about the Reivers Road, or to even try a tour from home, visit www.thereiversroad.com. As always, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and to share it with anyone else you think might enjoy the show. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or subscribe to the new Clan Carmichael USA Substack page at clancarmichael.substack.com. I also publish the occasional essay on the Clan Carmichael Substack page, so if that's something that you're interested in, be sure to get signed up, and you'll receive all the latest from Clan Carmichael USA. Lastly, if you like what we're doing, please leave a positive review. Your reviews help to promote the show and to make it easier for others to find us. So until next time, toujours près. See you soon.